I've been having all of this stuff going through my head, and it just kind of is what it is. I don't know. Um, so it's been a busy week, folks. How we doing? Came up 5 minutes early so that you guys could come get your notifications. Come on in, get your seats. Let's get this party started. In the meantime, in between time, I'm getting it together. I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready. Are you ready? Hey, kid, you rock and roll, rock on, ooh, my soul. Hey, did you boogie too? Did ya? Hey, shout summertime blues, jump up and down in the blue suede shoes. Hey, did you rock and roll, rock on? And where do we go from here? Which is the way they feel. Still looking for that blue jean, baby queen. Prettiest girl I've ever seen. See her shake on the movie screen. Jimmy Dean. A rock on. Hey, did you rock and roll? Now I'm a kid of the 70s, so yeah, we did a little of everything. I done told you that. So my music repertoire is kind of wide open. And I guess the song has been playing in my head. I guess certain songs had this, I guess, somewhat of a social appeal. They said, where do we go from here? Still looking for that blue jean. Well, I don't know. We're still looking for something. Um, in the 70s, I think it was about social consciousness or whatever, whatever. Now it's about more hate than I think we have seen since the 50s. I mean, in the 60s, we saw it come to a head as people started dying, be it J.F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy and so forth and so on. I call that the big three because back in the day, everybody had a picture. They had two pictures in their house. They had the picture of Jesus, a white picture of Jesus, and that picture that had Martin, John, and Robert, JFK, MLK, and RFK. So Kennedy and King's, they just went. They fell by the wayside. Um, we got a lot going on. Tonight, I just looked at what's happening, and I hate to say it, but in a perverted way, I'm somewhat encouraged. Ooh, I might have to do this bourbon a little bit more often. Sometimes I'll do the same bourbon from week to week, and sometimes I'll switch up, just depending on, you know, my feel and my attitude. But I'm kind of waiting on you guys to see what's happening. Looking for my YouTube people? Where my Facebook folk at? By this time, I have at least 3 or 4 people. And tonight we're running a little late. We're running a little behind. So you guys are, I should say. How many of you know who Monique Worrell is? Well, before the night, I'll tell you a little bit about her. And my segment that I call Meanwhile Here in Florida. Also, we're going to look at some of what's been happening around the country. We're definitely going to talk about Montgomery. Whether you guys know it or not, I have a history with Montgomery in the state of Alabama. But it's one of the things, sadly, that has given me some hope. Mainly because when we look at history, the history of the civil rights movement, we see young people standing in front of water hoses. We see young people sitting at lunch counters and just kind of taking the lead. One of the problems I had been complaining about with this generation is that what I call a sense of apathy in their, I guess they're wanting to just have a good time, being obsessed with things like video games and having a good time and just the whole 420 thing. And don't get me wrong, I have nothing against that. But on the other side, I'm looking at so many young people that are dying. And if you know me long enough, I made a prediction when they legalized marijuana that it would be one of the things that we had to look for. Just like cigarettes has been legalized in kills, it went from regular cigarettes to menthol or mentholated cigarettes, and that increased, I guess, its appeal in the Black community. We're looking at some of these young kids, and I'm having this conversation with my kids and with other people, kids, young adults who it's just part of their culture as much as it was part of our culture growing up. When we had the Cheech and Chong and we had the, you know, why can't we be friends with the war? And, you know, we had black light posters and, back then it was called smoking weed in the Black community, pot and grass in the white community. The powers to be called it I guess, a gateway to bigger and better drugs or more devastating drugs. But I'm going to just be the first to admit, I don't know what the answers are with this. But when I open up my computer and every day there's someone under the age of 50 and usually under the age of 35 who is no more, I want to see if there's a correlation between some of the things that they did, their lifestyle, and their early deaths. So I want to do like Elon Musk and start making false statements that I can't substantiate. When he started to talk about LeBron's son having the heart attack, I won't do that, but I will ask the question, and this is just a question for my young people. When you look around your community and you see kids preceding their parents. What do you think is the reason for that? Is it something that's going on? Is it something that we need to do something about as elders? Is it something that needs to be taken up? Um, what we see when any type of drug starts to affect what we call mainstream America or white America, then it's looked at as an epidemic. Case in point, the whole opioids thing. Then they talk about the number of people that are dying and hooked needlessly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it always starts with us. Panky says she thinks it's the food. I think it has something to do with it. When I look at chicken thighs and chicken, well, not so much the thighs, but the legs. Chicken legs look like drumsticks, you know? Once upon a time, the only people had breasts that were double D's and triple F's was churches. And we used to make jokes about church's chicken versus Popeyes or Jim Dandy's and even Roy Rogers back in the day. And back in the day, the drumstick was one of my favorite parts of the chicken. But nowadays, these drumsticks either been pumping iron or doing steroids. So yeah, I think food has something to do with it. I think it has everything to do with how they're living, what they're putting in their body. But smoking weed and vaping weed, I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, I'm looking for correlations. I'm a scientist. I'm a social scientist. I'm a physical scientist. So I always look for a correlation. When I look at some of the things today, I rented a car, and this car had the strongest weed smell. I'm sitting at the light one day, and there's a car three behind me, and I could smell less shit. So I don't know what it is, but there's something going on. And maybe it's a combination of all of the above. But like I said, I look for correlations. I look for cause and response and cause and effect and just try to figure things out. It's, especially when I see so many young people dying. So just was on the front of my mind. Tonight, it's about 10 past the half. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Before I do anything else, I want to say good evening and welcome to the show. My name is Hank Batiste. I'm your host. This is Omit da Logic. Before I get started, I always start off with this. I want to say I'm truly humbled that each of you chose to be here with me tonight. Of all the things you could be doing, you chose to be here. And I said choose, not chose, because it's an ongoing thing for most of you. That both motivates me and it humbles me. I'm a very confident person. Some people might say I'm either cocky or whatever. But to be able to get anybody to listen to what you have to say, to me, is humbling. Tonight, the voices in my head are encouraged, they're amused, and again, they're somewhat pessimistic. This past week, looking at what's been happening, I've been fielding or answering three questions. It seems when someone contacts me, I keep hearing these same questions over and over again. Question number one is, what do you think? What's your opinion on what happened in Montgomery? The second question that I get is, do you think that Trump will ever be convicted of a crime? The third is, if Trump is convicted, what will happen? Will we have a civil war? Will his disciples act up? So forth and so on. So I'm going to try to deal with those three tonight. Before I do that, I want to do this thing called Meanwhile in Florida. You know, DeSantis is running a distant second in his presidential primary. He fired his one campaign manager and he rebooted or reloaded his campaign, however he decides to terminology he chooses to use. And in doing so, he's been looking for a way of garnering media attention. So here in the state of Florida, we have this Ninth Circuit state attorney by the name of Monique Worrell, Worrell. Now, I admire this young woman, young Black woman, simply because, and I'm not taking a dab at Kamala Harris, but I said this during the presidential election. One of the boldest things that any attorney, state attorney, or prosecutor can do is go their own way and not just be a rubber stamp for everything that the police does or do. State attorney of the 9th District, Monique Worrell, was doing her own campaign of holding these police and sheriffs under her jurisdiction to a higher order. And when we look at what didn't happen, and this is me kind of revisiting some of the things that I've said in the past, because I think you need to be reminded, especially going into 2024. One of the things I said about Nancy Pelosi is she had the audacity after George Floyd was killed and Black Lives Matter was front page news. She donned the kente cloth and took a knee in this chevron formation. Or if you think about a flock of birds, there's always one bird that has the lead, and then there's two tiers that fan out, making a kind of upside down V formation. And she took a knee in the rotunda, on the floor of the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. And she promised police reform. And she did nothing. So State Attorney Worrell has been trying to do something. She's been holding these police to the letter of the law. And in an attempt to get, well, it was an attempt because he was actually very successful in doing so. I needed to sit up a little bit. I felt like I was sitting on the floor. In an attempt to get media attention, Ronald Trump DeSantis, the satanic one, decided to take it upon himself and fire this woman, the state's attorney. Suddenly, she's been in office for almost 4 years, and she was looking at re-election because she was elected. She fired him. I wish you could have. Did you pay attention to what I said? He fired her. truth be told, what she did takes a lot of courage. Then he appointed this black guy who once upon a time was applauding Monique Worrell and her efforts. DeSantis appointed him, and he came up tap dancing and shuffling in pure Clarence Thomas form. So the handwriting on the wall is, as Monique said, her legal team is looking at taking a course of action, but realistically, DeSantis has already set up the judges. The state legislature has an overwhelmingly red majority. So chances are it's going to fall on deaf ears and nothing's going to happen. So what she called it was DeSantis erasing democracy here in the state of Florida. And I wholeheartedly agree. It adds to my pessimism. I'm pessimistic because I keep telling the young folks they have to get involved, especially young folks of color. And then I was watching TV earlier, and I saw this young white boy, a white man, and he was talking about, he came up with an organization called Leaders We Want, or the Leaders We Need. And I said, all along, I've been talking about this. And he talked about some of the older politicians relinquishing power. And it made the hair stand up on my neck. When I see somebody come in with the okay of the establishment, it makes me leery. It makes me cynical. It adds to my pessimism because I feel it's a setup. I feel like it's the next generation of more of the same. So we come up with this organization that we call the Leaders We Need. Who deemed them necessary? How much diversity is in there? Who are they leading? And what are they leading for? What's their agenda? Where did their backing come from? So these are some of the questions that come to mind. When someone bursts on the political scene, they're awarded media attention on CNN or MSNBC. That doesn't just happen. And then they said, well, some of the older politicians are ready to relinquish power. As Arsenio used to say, things that make you go, So let's get to those three questions. I'm going to do that and I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to make it quick tonight. Promise. What do I think of Montgomery? Well, I call Montgomery social justice in the social media environment. Let me preface this by saying everybody talks about Martin Luther King. A few months ago, I told you here in the city of Daytona, there's a house I don't know if it's the birthplace, but I know it was his house, of Howard Thurman. Now, most people don't know who Howard Thurman was because he was kind of the brains behind the nonviolent movement. If you remember, before I told you, he was a classmate of Martin Luther King Sr. So here we have an older person giving advice to a younger person that's being groomed to do a particular job. One of the things that made Martin, Dr. King, so successful, in my opinion, I truly admire the man. But we have to understand that when there was a Martin, there was a Malcolm, there was a Huey P., there was a Huey Newton, there was a Bobby Seals, there was a Stokely Carmichael, there was an Angela Davis, there was a Fred Hampton. And all of these people, because they were more radical, because they were more militant, it made it easier to deal with Dr. King. I'd rather deal with the Negro who has some sense than the one who's talking about fighting fire with fire. Remember when Malcolm says, a man is a fool if he doesn't defend himself. A man is a fool if he allows himself to be beat and not strike back. So, of course, they would rather go with the person that would take the licks and easier to deal with. Said all that to say this. I'm somewhat encouraged by the Montgomery thing, because one of the things that's been causing me trepidation, and I'm going to say this, and I don't care how it makes anybody feel. One of the things that's been causing me internal trepidation and anguish and upsetting me to my core is I wonder, with our young people seeming to be so apathetic and caring so little, what would happen when my generation is no more? Who's to pick up the mantle and carry it? And then I'm reminded by looking at this Montgomery thing that these young people, they're going to fight the fight on their own terms. Some of them going to do the protests, but some of them are going to fight fire with fire. And that's my lead-in to the other two questions. So just in case you don't know, let me tell you a couple things about Montgomery. My history with Montgomery, back in 2004, I accepted a position as the director of radiology at Jackson Hospital, downtown Montgomery. At the same time, I was being recruited to be the CEO and executive director of the County Health Center in Tuskegee. In 2004, going into 2005, I was trying to stir up the locals, the natives. Hey guys, do you guys realize this is the 50th anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycotts? And there was this sense of apathy, like, man. And I remember being in the barbershop and being so frustrated that this guy was cutting my hair, and I stopped him. I said, do y'all know y'all free? And the barber that was cutting my hair, he was a kind of older dude, and he said, "Young man," and he patted me on my back. He said, "Your haircut's free." I said, "No, sir, I'm gonna pay you for the haircut, but you know." So when I see what I see, every man fights within the realm of his possibilities. The Hulk is going to be the Hulk. Thor is going to use his hammer and lightning. Captain America is going to throw his mighty shield. And then I saw this meme because I'm thinking everybody has to fight the way they know how to fight. Some of us are strategic thinkers. So we sit behind the scenes and we tell the young people, okay, what I need you to do is go into the restaurant. Y'all order some food. And when they refuse to pay, when they refuse to serve you and they order you out of the restaurant, you just sit there. And then one of the kids started to sing, and somebody threw food on them, somebody spit on them, and they sat right there, steadfast and held at peace. And then they interlocked arms when they were escorted out, and it was shot with water cannons. These were not just regular hose pipes. This wasn't the hose that you use to wash your car on a Sunday. There was some velocity. So why do I feel encouraged about Montgomery? Before I answer that, let me tell you a little bit about Montgomery today. The city of Montgomery has a young black mayor by the name of Stephen Reed. The city of Montgomery has an older black chief of police by the name of Darrell Albert. He's only the 15th chief of the city of Montgomery, the 15th. So that tells you some of these folks have been chief of police for their entire life. But before you start applauding, that's where the blackness and the black advocating stops. That's where it ends. The difference between having a white politician, a Jewish politician, and a black politician is the black politician doesn't feel that he can or she can vehemently or zealously advocate for the people of color, the black people in their community. Like Monique Worrell, they know that if they do, their days are numbered. So if Stephen Reed has aspirations of being more than the mayor of the city of Montgomery, he's not going to be as zealous as if his name was, I don't know, George Wallace, and this was 1958, and he stood on the stairs of the University of Alabama and he said, "No segregation today, no segregation tomorrow, no segregation forever." And just in case you don't remember, at some point of his political career, George Wallace, and I'm not talking about the black guy that used to be on Tom Joyner, I'm talking about the white governor of the state of Alabama who had an epiphany and had a change of heart. And as a result, was shot and crippled for the rest of his life because he did a 180 and had an about face. So here's what they did. Stephen Reed and the chief of police, Darrell J. Albert, arrested 3 white men. Richard Roberts, age 48, Alan Todd, age 23, Zachary Shipman, age 25, for attacking the co-captain of the little cruise boat, 2-hour tour, Damian Pickett. But here's the pissed off part. Here's the part that sticks in my throat. That pisses me off to the utmost of pissosity. These 3 men were only charged with 3rd-degree misdemeanor assault. Of course, we've been promised that the investigation is ongoing, and they've called them federal prosecutors to see if this is a hate crime, related to a hate crime. But it's just insulting, because it goes without saying that if the tables were turned, if the riverboat captain, Damian, had been white, and his 3 assailants' names were Raheem Richards, Malik Todd, and Zachary Washington, they would have been categorized by the media as thugs first. They would have been categorized as these violent thugs that attacked a man who was only doing his job. And I promise you, they would have been charged with 1st-degree felonious assault and aggravated battery for ganging up on that one man. They also would have been charged with inciting a riot. And the race card would have been played ad nauseum. The most, let me not go down there. Tuberville is now a U.S. Senator from the state of Alabama. Just in case you don't remember, and I shouldn't give him oxygen on my show, but I'm doing this for my brothers in uniform, my sisters in uniform, whose promotions are being held up because he's on the Armed Forces Committee. And he decides he's going to hold up military promotions. Why? Because he wants to make a name for himself. Just a few years ago, he was the head coach at Auburn, head football coach at Auburn. And now he's a U.S. Senator. And within a matter of hours, he was on a plane from D.C. back to Alabama, doing his own investigation of this melee that took place on the riverfront or the waterfront in Montgomery, Alabama. And when he found out that it was the white people that initiated it, what the media didn't say is this has been going on for a while. They've been aggravating this man for quite some time. This was not an isolated incident. Tuberville would have been pushing for maximum sentencing to get these thugs, these violent thugs, who are threatening life, our lifestyle in the city of Alabama, in the city of Montgomery, in the state of Alabama. We got to get them off the street. But due to gerrymandering, and all of this was going on under Pelosi's leadership. So when I was beating up and beating on Pelosi, this is why I was doing it. Because these things were going on. There is only in the whole state of Alabama, Alabama is about 22 to 27% black. And there's only one black district in the entire state. That's because gerrymandering is where they rewrite and redraw district lines to dilute black power, black political power. Still think Pelosi was such a great leader? Still think I just beat up on her because she was a woman? Mm-mm. So, question number 2. Do I think Trump will ever be convicted? The quick and dirty is hell no. Simply because 70% of Republicans now believe that somehow Trump won and Joe Biden is not a legitimate president. Despite all of these legal cases that he had, his own people, despite all of these red states that either remain red and other people won, but Trump lost in those states. So let me get this straight. The elections were fair for everybody else that was Republican on the presidential ticket except you. Fool, that just means that they don't like you. But if you tell a lie long enough, and I'm going to say this to the men and women, it's not just women, because sometimes if a brother tell you, yeah, it wasn't me, wasn't me, wasn't me, wasn't me, wasn't me. First I saw you on the counter, wasn't me. Then I saw you on the sofa, wasn't me. Then I saw you in the shower, wasn't me. The woman just gives up and says, okay, it wasn't you, just to keep the peace. But it's not just the man, because the women could do the same thing. And women have a way of needling and beating the man down with words, where we even have a saying. What? How they say? Happy spouse, happy house. But that spouse has nothing to do with the man, huh? Happy wife, happy life? Then why the man die so much sooner? So anybody tells a lie enough, it's not that people really start to believe it. You just beat them down to a point where they say, okay, enough already. You won, yay. %70 of Republicans believe that Trump was cheated out the election. Now, remember, it used to be 30%. Then it was 38%. Now it's up to 68%. So I'm just going to round that 68 to 70. And if we look at our demographic mix is 1/3 Republican, 1/3 Democrats, and 1/3 independent. And let's say a jury is comprised of 12 people. So we've got a 33% that about 4 of those people on that jury are going to be Republican. In some states where there's gerrymandering and we have a certain type of governor or we have a certain type of prosecutor or district attorney who has a red tag and calls himself a Republican, a Trump publican, or a Trump disciple, he's going to stack the deck. So 6 of those people, but let's say for all intents and purposes that we play fair and we get this ideal jury with 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and 4 independents. That's the makeup of the 12 people. It only takes 1 for him to walk free. So in this day and time, where can we find 12 people that can honestly conduct themselves and believe in this fallacy that we call democracy in this republic? How do we not know if one of those people or 2 of those people on that jury wasn't on the Capitol grounds on January the 6th? How would you know? And then the other question I keep getting asked is, if he's convicted, will he go to jail? If we can't get 12 people, let's say for the sake of argument that some 12 people actually convict him of one of the 47 5011 crimes that he has been indicted for. See, I hate to keep beating up on Pelosi. So I'm going to beat up on Pelosi and Chuck Schumer this time. The one thing that the Republicans say is true. When Biden came into office, Biden said, he is no longer president. I want him to be held accountable. I want him to be arrested. And then if it had happened in the infancy of Biden's presidency, if it had happened in the beginning of Biden's presidency, then we wouldn't be in a situation where the number 1 Republican candidate is facing 5011 felony charges. Now let's think about that for just a second. Then I'm going to back out of here because I done had enough, and I know you have too. How many people in here, somebody that they know that went to jail, got a felony, and now they can't vote? Do you not see the disparity in you going to jail and losing your right to vote and somebody else being accused of 5011 felonies, federal charges, everything from intimidating witnesses and threatening people? And before I go any further, the federal judge gave him a gag order. What gag order? If it were me, my behind would be sitting in jail somewhere, trying not to drop the soap. So, let me sum it up. How do I feel about Montgomery? It shows me that the young people don't fight the way I want them to fight, but they believe enough in making where they live, with all of their problems of black on black crime, and they're willing to fight for a way of life. So that has me just a little encouraged. If we could rededicate how they fight, if we could refocus that into political power, just imagine. Encouraged. Number two, do I think Trump will ever be convicted? Highly unlikely. Number three, if he is convicted, will he serve any time? Not. And I'm going to throw one in for free. This one is for me. What will happen if a convicted felon who is a sociopathic narcissist and demagogue becomes president when he's already told you do away with parts of the Constitution? The first part he's going to do away with is the 25th Amendment that limits every president to 2 terms. And try to make himself a president for life. When we look at what's happening in Russia, when we look at what's happening in Israel, when we look at what's happening in Ecuador, when we look at what's happening all around the world, everybody wants to be a dictator. Everybody wants to be Idi Amin Dada. Everybody wants to be Kim Jong-un. Everybody wants to be Mussolini, and the beat goes on and on and on and on and on. So if you know some young folks and they're looking for justice, social justice, and social and media world, let's try to reach them. Because the next generation of status quo is coming in out of the shadows. And they're calling themselves the leaders that we need. Who is we? And was I given the voice? Were you? Did anybody poll any of us? Did anybody ask us what type of representation we needed? And to this federal judge who is now walking around with her own entourage of bodyguards, that alone should be enough to convict us behind. Would gag order. So if what DeSantis did in Florida is deplorable, imagine what Trump is doing on a daily basis. And better yet, if DeSantis is the runner-up and he gets the nod, he's going to try to out-Trump Trump. So let's get it together, folks. Where do we go from here? That's all I got for you tonight. Before I go, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing I ask you to do every week. Go to my YouTube page. Sign up. Omit da Logic. OMITdaLOGIC. OMITdaLOGIC. Subscribe. Ring the bell. And better yet, share this with somebody, because this is definitely a message that somebody needs to hear. It might not be the sexiest delivery, but if you can find one lie in what I said tonight, I will apologize next week and the week after that and the week after that. And if you do that for me, I'll be here next week. Same Baptiste time, same Baptiste place. Remember what I said. Don't be so afraid to die that you forget to live for a purpose. Because one thing about this game called life, nobody leaves alive. So make the dash, make that dash, make that hyphen stand for something. And as always important, I wish you love. I wish you peace. 2 fingers to the sky. And like your man, head grease. I'm out of here, folks. You couldn't hear me? I'm going to go back and look at this. All right, Jan. I'm going to look at it, babe. I'm going to see what's going on. Maybe I said something. Maybe I said Pelosi too many times and it pissed the powers to be off. I don't know. But we'll see. Good night. Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. The changes I've been going dry. Missing you. Missing you. I don't know. I kind of feel like I want to sing tonight. Thank you, ladies. I'm going to come check this out. I'm going to look at what's going on here. Looking at some of your comments here. Wait a minute. How he fired an elected official? He just did it. He said, according to him, she wasn't doing her job. And the same guy who was in her camp that was applauding the things that Monique Worrell was doing, and I ain't gonna say his name because I ain't giving his punk behind no oxygen on this show. He stood up in Clarence Thomas fashion and said, I can't wait to get a free trip. So yeah. The Black Lives Matter, I kind of fell out with some of the things the girls said, only because we got to stop having Black women who thinks is me or you and allow the system to separate us. She says Black women turn. No, it's Black people turn. And if there's a Black man who has what it takes, don't just disregard him simply because he's a man. By the same token, I don't believe a woman should be disregarded. It's about leadership. But it takes more than one, because not everybody speaks the same language. So in one area, it could be a brother, because the brother's going to listen to him. In another area, it could be a sister, because she has the voice and she speaks with a certain vernacular that resonates with the multitudes. So stop letting society dictate to us, you are me. We don't have to sacrifice each other. There's strength in numbers. It should be a hate crime. We'll wait and see. Daryl Albert is the chief of police. Stephen is the mayor. His dad was a career politician. So I'm sure he's living vicariously through his son. What his son is going to do moving forward, he's going to punt the football to the federal investigator, federal prosecutor, and make them the heavy until he has the courage. But too many of them are looking at Monique and how she was sacrificed. Yeah. And she's right. In the state of Florida, in the state of Georgia, I don't know, maybe she would have had a little bit more success. But I don't know. If anybody talk about something being fixed, I don't know how Stacey keep losing. That's all I got to say about that. Good night, ladies. I hope I dealt with most of you and cited the ride. Most definitely, popular vote doesn't count. Oh, popular vote never counts, baby. We the people voted and didn't vote for. Doesn't mean a thing. The person that Ron DeSantis appointed to replace to replace Monique Worrell, she beat him in the election. So he's been runner up forever. He moved. Good night, people.